Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. You're tuned into Intellectual Chocolate, where we have brilliant conversations with intelligent Black minds. And today we are definitely here with a brilliant Black mind. My name is Rashida Anderson, and I am host here on Intellectual Chocolate. And I have with me today Kiara McClendon. And she is an author of a book called Adventures of the Money Mavens. And it is an activity book for kids. But before we get into that, we want to have Kiara tell us a little bit about herself. So welcome to the platform, Kiara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here to talk with you and to talk a little bit about the Adventures of the Money Mavens.
Cool. So before we get into the book, like I stated, I would like for you to tell us a little bit about your background and maybe what have led you to write this book.
Sure. So, well, I grew up a native of New Jersey, so shout out to everybody that's from New Jersey / the tri-state area. And I was fortunate in my life to have a lot of strong familial influences as well as educators. And my financial education actually started in the 5th grade, which I know a lot of people are not as fortunate to be able to say the same thing. I had a great teacher. His name is Mr. Elder. Unfortunately, Mr. Elder has passed. But he taught us about check writing and filling out a checkbook and all these other financial related topics when I was in his 5th grade math class. And that always stuck with me, in addition to the fact that he just challenged my mind, challenged the way that I thought, my ability to just always stay focused on like my potential and never giving up on myself. But I will say that my financial education, my financial literacy education did kind of end in the 5th grade. Like I actually didn't have any more formal financial education in school for really the rest of my schooling, up until I think I took an accounting class when I was in high school, but that was really it. And then, you go through high school, you go through 4 years of college. I also have 2 master's degrees. So I went through 6 years of college, and throughout that whole process, I never took a class on finance anything. And part of that obviously is my choice. Like I didn't necessarily choose to take a class, but the other part of it is that it wasn't required for me to take a class. And I think I was signing up for all these student loans and all these other things and making these big financial decisions and then not learning the proper way to handle them. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, you're in college and they tell you, you go to college and you get this great paying job and you get all these benefits and everything's great, right? Until you get your first paycheck. And you realize, wait, taxes, medical deductions, Social Security, and all these other expenses that you didn't really account for, just coming out of a college environment thinking that your salary is going to be the end all and be all. And I learned pretty quickly, like, hey, wait a minute, this wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. And I think during that process, I actually was kind of frustrated, but I was frustrated with myself. And I don't say I was frustrated with my family, but I just felt like, why didn't we have these conversations, as I was going through middle school or high school, or even as young as elementary school, where, someone was talking to me actively about the responsibility that it takes to really have money, and manage a life around a career. So I was sitting in my living room and I was like, man, we really should be having these conversations with our kids. Like we should have the conversation about money, and not just as a materialistic thing, but as a tool for access with our kids. So how could I create a tool, having no prior experience on creating a book? How could I create a tool to facilitate that conversation? Like if I was a kid, how would I want to learn about money, right? So I set out and I created all the characters for the book. And I was like, I want all the characters to be super unique. I want them to be really diverse. I wanted all their names to be related to money as well as their birthdays. And I wanted kids to really get like immersed in the story. I wanted it to read like a storybook. And I wanted kids and their families and their influences, older brother, big sister, teacher, after school program, if they have, a very interesting family structure, maybe a grandma, grandpa, foster parents. I wanted whoever was their adult influence to really be able to use the book with them and for it to be a conversation piece just for the whole family and for all different age groups, but specifically for our children. So the book is intended for children that are under the age of 11, but really targeting those children who are under the age of 8. And we are also working on another book, a much longer activity book, as well as a comic book that should be coming out next year. That will be more targeted towards older children. But really, with this book, I had a lot of fun, and I wanted kids to have fun too. And I wanted them to see, like, you know, I look at money as something that, you know, when my dad or my mom wants to go to the grocery store, I know they use that to pay for groceries. I know that's where, you know, how we keep the lights on in our home. Or I know that in some ways, for some families, like, money can be a sense of stress for them as well. So I know money is important. However, like, what does it actually mean? What does this dollar bill mean? Or what does this $20 bill mean? And, like, why is it so important? So I think all of those things kind of went into just my inspiration for the book.
You know what, that's great. And you said so many things that just kind of, that I was just jotting down because just so many different thoughts ran through my head. One, when you were talking about your first exposure to financial literacy was in the 5th grade. And then when you kind of gave examples of what those things were, you were writing checks, you were, you know, those different kind of things. Sometimes I think when you talk financial literacy, I don't think people really understand a lot of times what we're talking about when you say that. So right. How would you define financial literacy?
Sure. I think it's the understanding or the education behind, like, the power of money, the power of finance, not just actual paper money, but what it means to have a credit score and what that takes to build a strong credit score, what it means to create wealth for yourself versus being rich. Because we always go back and forth, especially I feel like in the Black community, between this thought process of being rich versus being wealthy. What is wealth? What does generational wealth look like? What does it mean to, you know, okay, yes, I have $20, but I also invest. So what are investments? What does that look like? What does banking in the modern day look like? Even bringing into play the idea of, like, cryptocurrency and those other kind of newer, kind of mysterious ways of generating wealth, or just that understanding of currency in and of itself. So all of those things kind of fall under the umbrella of financial literacy. So literacy in and of itself is having an understanding or being able to actively, like, understand and engage in something. And then from a financial standpoint, it's everything that falls under the umbrella of finance, not just cash money, but wealth, credit, credit scores, check writing, banking, all of that good stuff. Even home ownership in a lot of ways, and the wealth that's associated with multiple streams of income, all of that stuff kind of falls under the umbrella, at least when I think about it.
Right. No, I think that's great. I think that's great when you think about all of those components, because I think that oftentimes we may not fully understand what's being said when we start talking about financial literacy, and then why it's so important, you know, to teach those things to our kids. So when you say we shouldn't be, you were talking about your college experience and having completed your undergraduate and having a double master and still with that, if your track isn't finance or some type of accounting or that type of degree, you're not required to take any of those courses. And like you said, you're taking on a lot of debt, which, you know, falls under the whole concept of financial literacy. And they'll make you take an art appreciation, and you got to take a science, and you got to take all of this other stuff. Right. but the basis by which you need to live every day, like art appreciation, that's wonderful. You know, science is wonderful. You know, it's around us all day. However, I think what's going to have a strong impact on my life is how financially literate I am over, you know, some of those other things.
Right. I mean, I think, and it's not a hard fix, right? Like, you require for children in college or young adults in college to take math, right? Or social science. Like, you can build a financial, like, planning class or some sort of finance class into a required curriculum. So then you start getting into, why isn't it required, right? And why isn't it a part of a curriculum for college? And a lot of these kids go to liberal arts programs where you want to create a well-rounded individual, right? And in doing that, I think it's important for us to know, you know, if I take out these student loans, the interest on them compounds daily. Like, that's something that I didn't know. I remember making a payment on my loans one time and thinking to myself, I just paid this, and this is more than the balance when I previously like went in and paid for this. So like, what's going on here? And I remember reaching out to a representative and them telling me, well, the reason why this is the case is because your interest is compounding daily. And I was shocked. Like, these are things, and I'm sure, obviously, if you sit down and read your, like, promissory note and all those legal documents that nobody wants to read, you'll learn it. But the problem is that nobody wants to read it, and you're not learning it, or someone's not kind of sitting beside you and saying, hey, this is a lot of money that you're signing up to eventually owe to someone. And this is how it negatively impacts you.
You know, that's a good point you make, because when you said the interest is compounding daily, that speaks to financial literacy there. Because even if you read the contract, would you even know what compounding interest is? You know what I mean? So there's so many different, layers to this. But I just want to welcome anyone who may have just come in to let you know that you are speaking with Kiara McClendon. She is our special guest for today. She is an author of the book Adventures of the Money Maker. It is a financial literacy book for children. And I'm Rashida Anderson, your host here on Intellectual Chocolate, where we have intelligent conversations with brilliant Black minds. And what I would like for you to do when this interview is over, once you finish viewing, is to go to our website, go to intellectualchocolate.com and subscribe there. You will become a part of our email list, and we can communicate with you through that platform. And also, if you are in need, we're talking about financial literacy. If you are in need of financial literacy, or if you want to just learn how to grow your business today, we also invite you to go to the blackbusinessschool.com. So Kiara, yes, I didn't want to be the one to tap into somewhat of a conspiracy conversation, but I think you kind of opened the door a little bit, and I'm just the type, if you open it a little bit, I'm gonna kick it open. So talked about the whole notion of, you would even question if things that are financial have such a strong impact on how we live our lives daily. Why isn't it required? And then you do kind of wonder, somebody has to know these things are important. Somebody has to know it's important for us to know financial literacy, in that somebody is potentially gaining from us not being financially literate. So what are your thoughts around something like that?
Sure. So I'm going to completely butcher this quote, but I believe it was, long story short, there is a famous historian in the Black community who said, like, if you want to keep Black people ignorant of something, put it in a book, right?
Malcolm X. Yes.
Yes. Okay, because I was definitely going to say the wrong person, so thank you for
That's a Malcolm X quote, yes.
I say all of that to say, like, I think there's a lot of information that is almost like in your face, but we're not being pointed in the right direction as to where to find it. And people, like you said, are capitalizing off of the fact that we are ignorant in a financial literacy area. You know what I'm saying? And in financial literacy as a whole. It's almost like if too many people know this information, we'll have too many wealthy people. And we don't need too many wealthy people. So let's just try to, like, dumb it down or make it below the surface or under the surface level type of information. Let's require, and again, this is not to knock any ancillary classes like art or science or things of that nature, but let's require those things and not necessarily require the information or the skills or the classes where, students actually will need to use this in their adult lives. So I think there definitely is money being made and keeping people dumb, or money being made and keeping people ignorant. And I think that as a Black community, like, and as minorities, whether you're Black, Spanish, whatever your background is, like, it's important for you to see that people are kind of working to keep information from you that really should be given to you, especially in the education system, especially if you go to a public school. I know when I was doing my research just on financial literacy as a whole, I believe there are only 5 or 6 states that have a requirement for their high school students to have some sort of financial literacy education. And a lot of those states are actually in the South.
Wow.
Yeah. So go ahead. Were you going to
No,
say
no,
something?
that's really interesting, because when we talk about, you know, the Black community and how we treat money, or just our ideas about money, one thing we know for sure, even though we may be lacking in our financial literacy, we are huge consumers. We're consuming, we're all of our money is being spent. We own it, according to Dr. Claude Anderson, as a collective, we only have 1/2 of a percent of the nation's wealth cumulatively. So, you know, the fact that you have to believe that our financial illiteracy is playing a big part in that, because we're not being taught, to your point, from a kid in school. And I agree with you. I think high school, it's too old. I think we need to be capturing them in the elementary school. That's why I think what you're doing is so great, capturing the kids very young, making money just a conversation and a topic that becomes just a part of our everyday life, and just different ways that we navigate just on a regular. It doesn't have to be like this special thing. Make it a part of just the way we function, like just the way you know how to formulate a sentence. You need to know how to, you know, the concept of money and what you do with it and that sort of thing, because we have to really, I mean, we can educate adults, but a lot of us already have really bad habits. So it's going to take a lot of work and a discipline for us to undo those habits. But if we start with a new generation and start teaching them these things early on, we can now address it at adult level to make any corrections that are needed, but then also prevent it from ever happening, you know, with our new generation of children coming up. Because knowing that, so we need to understand early on what it means to be a consumer, you know, what it means. And you talked about wealth building and what it means to take on a lot of debt, because I think when you just lay out simple math to people, like we're teaching math, this will be a great place for you to integrate financial literacy. My son, I have a 10-year-old son, and he had a math question, and it was something about somebody made this amount of dollars per hour and they worked these many hours. What was their salary? So it was a multiplication question. And I was like, oh, that's great. So I took that opportunity and I said, look at how much they said he made. I said, now these are how many hours that he worked. He made this per hour. This is how much many hours he worked. Now you did the math equation. So this is how much money this person made in 1 week. And then so now I'm able to tell him it's like, this is how real life works. But then I'm also able to say, well, how do you think that you can live off of that if you're making $1,000 a week, but your rent is $700? And then your car note or what, you could start to make this stuff make sense to kids early on. So they'll know, like, wait a minute, I know that if I'm not, if I don't choose a career where I'm going to generate X amount of dollars, then I won't be able to live. You know what I mean? Just like those basic things. Or I'm not going to go out and get a credit card if you're telling me that the interest rate is going to be this, or, you know, this crazy number. Or for you taking on student loan debt, I didn't know that this was going to, if they're telling us in elementary school that it's going to compound daily, you know, these sorts of things and what that really means. You're going to shift the thinking of a whole generation. And then when you tie into the concept of really being honest with our community about where we are in terms of our wealth as a collective, to say we only control and possess 1/2 of 1% of the nation's wealth, you're going to start getting these creative minds to start thinking. Yes. We're going to start thinking like bosses, and we're going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. But if they're exposed early on.
Right. I mean, you brought up a lot of great points. And I think going back to just the idea that, like, we need to have these conversations with our kids. Our kids are extremely impressionable, right? Everything that they see you do, everything that they hear you say, every, like, emotional response that you have to something kids see, right? So that's why some people find it somewhat controversial to let kids learn about money or, you know, how to treat women or whatever through music. Depending on what music you let your child listen to, it could have a negative or a positive, you know, just impression on them. So the same is the way you do or do not talk about money. So if your child, or even if they're not a very young child, if your child's like 10, 11, 12, and they hear about mortgages, right? And they come home and say, Mom or Dad, how much do you pay for your mortgage? And you say, why are you asking me that? That's none of your business. Like, then money kind of becomes a secretive thing, or wealth in general becomes secretive to them. And you're not able to freely have those conversations with your kids. I know just in my own life, my grandparents were very influential in talking to me about wealth as well. Like, but I was much older. Like, I think I was a young adult just kind of navigating this whole, I think I was trying to buy my first car, right? And they were talking to me a little bit about how to make the choice of buying a car. And at that time, I think I was like 20, 21, which still is not a bad time to have those type of conversations. But had I had them at like 12, 10, 8, 6, maybe I would have been a little bit more prepared. And then going back to what you said as well, just about shifting the mindset, that's what I want this book to do. Like, I want this book bigger than it just being a book. I want it to be a tool of access, a conversation piece, a creative, like, spark for these kids to look at and say, wow, like somebody who, is young, is vibrant, didn't really know how to be an author. And then with my illustrator, like, he's also a person of color. So like this man, this Black man is an illustrator for a book. And like, he's never illustrated for a book of this size before. Like, all of these things that we're doing to kind of break down those barriers for kids, that they look at and say, I can do this too. Like, I didn't learn how to start my own business. I learned all of like, through another example, I learned it myself. Like, I literally had to research online, figure it out, register the business, do all of those things. And then from there, now I can share that type of information, or those secrets, I guess you could say, with kids. And then they can look at themselves and say, working for this institution, or working for this business, or working for someone else's dream isn't the only way that I can make money. I can be my own entrepreneur. And I think that's a big theme in the first book as well, just dreaming big, like one day owning your own business, one day being your own boss, and like creating a legacy for yourself. And I think the more that we can plant that seed in the minds of our children, the better off I think we can be as a generation, because, we talk about being bosses, or I'm a boss this, I'm a boss that, but like, what does that really mean though?
Right.
And are you really a boss if you're not making any money, if you're not generating wealth for yourself, if your business is not being sustained? So I think it's all well and cool to watch TV and see the rap videos and all that, people like throwing money everywhere, but you have to understand that a lot of that money, they go to the bank, take it out, throw it in the video, pick it up, bring it back. Like, that's not reality. Let's create a reality for kids on what money looks like. And it's not the Rolexes, and that's not to knock it. Like, if you have Rolex money, God bless you. Like, maybe one day we'll all be in a position to have Rolex money, but until we get to that point, and until we've taken care of all of our basic financial needs, like, let's not glorify that. Let's glorify education and creativity and entrepreneurship and all of that. So I think all of those points that you bring up are super important. And then you had made mention of just adding math to it. So I don't want to give away too much for the second book, but that's a much longer book. And a lot of those types of problems and simulations are actually built into the book. So when people go and pick that up, they'll be able to have even more of a conversation with their kids about that, about the integration between finance and math and just everyday life activities, bills, all of that great stuff. So
no, I think that's awesome. And for anyone who is just joining us, I want you to know that we are talking to Kiara McClendon. She is the author of a children's book. It is an activity book called The Adventures of the Money Maven. And I'm Rashida Anderson, your host here on Intellectual Chocolate. And I would like to have you, once you're finished viewing this broadcast, for you to go to intellectualchocolate.com and subscribe there. It's so important that we continue to support these platforms. You know, Intellectual Chocolate is a Black-owned media platform, and we pride ourselves in giving opportunities to people in the community who may not be able to get media coverage anywhere else. this is our media. So it's important that we support it. So we want you to go to intellectualchocolate.com and subscribe there. And because we pride ourselves in having intelligent conversations with brilliant Black minds, and we are speaking with a brilliant Black mind today. Again, her name is Kiara McClendon. And also, I want to invite you to go to the Black Business School. We're talking about financial literacy with kids, and I know there are some programs there for your children. So I would invite you to go to the blackbusinessschool.com to learn financial literacy. And if you want to learn how to grow your business or even start a business, there's a lot of tools there that you can get started with. So I know that we talked about what led you to writing this book. So now let's get a little more into the book. You said that the target ages are anywhere from range from age 3 to 11. So where would you say that it would be an ideal place or ideal people to get a copy of this book? Yeah, I know schools may be a good place, but what are some of the other places where this book should be stored? Or if someone is viewing, if they're in a particular background, what would be a perfect match for them?
Sure. So, I mean, honestly, this book can be used for any organization or group that specifically has an influence in the lives of other children. So that's anywhere from an after-school program, a nonprofit organization, a before-school program. You know, if children are in foster care or in an orphanage, you know, or like the Ronald McDonald House, places where children may be or their families may be dealing with a hardship, but still want to keep that child engaged. Like the book is meant to educate on financial literacy and entrepreneurship, but it's also meant to be a tool where kids have fun, where they color, where they enjoy themselves. And so I think having the financial literacy theme just only adds to the idea that it's a creative outlet for kids. Any art programs or even programs that celebrate creativity for kids, I could see the book being used there as well, because as I said earlier, it's just a tool, and we want to provide as many kids access to this tool as possible.
No, I think that's great. I think that tying the creative piece and the art, being that it's an activity book and that people can actually, there's some coloring and it's for kids of the age group that are into coloring. I think that's great. I think that's great. So if you are out there and you have an art program, or you want to combine some kind of art and financial literacy, or just art and education, that'll be a great way to connect the two. I think that's great. I want to talk about this quote that you made on your website. And you said, success starts in your mind. You must be brave enough to think you can accomplish anything you set your mind to. And I love that quote. One of the things that I like about it is you said you must be brave enough to think you can accomplish anything you set your mind to. Why would you use the word brave?
Sure. I mean, I think that it takes courage to do anything that like you don't know how to do inherently, right? So anything that you're not formally trained to do, and even things that you are formally trained to do, right? You're putting your own like thought process and your own creativity and your own dreams and your own goals together, and then showing them to the world, which takes bravery. It takes courage. Like people aren't going to like it. Like I know there are people who might hear about this and not like the idea. And, you know, I still have to keep going. I still have to continue to want to make an impact for children. And I think in this world, we spend so much time being afraid of other people's opinions and of the negativity or of the obstacles that we'll face, that I think for a lot of people that I know personally, and I'm sure a lot of people just in general, like they let that fear or they let that lack of confidence in whatever they're doing hold them back. Or just that I've never done this before. I don't know how to do it. I don't have a mentor. I don't have a guide. Nobody's, shown me how to do this. And it's like, no, be brave. Like, don't worry about other people's opinions. Don't worry about not knowing. Educate yourself. Look online. Like, ask the questions. And if you still can't find the information, be okay with making a mistake or two in the process so that you can learn. So I think we need to celebrate bravery with our kids. We spend a lot of time creating like fear around our children, especially in this day and age, with a lot of things just going on in the world. And I think our children just need to be empowered. Like, you can do anything. And I'm a strong and firm believer of the idea that you can do absolutely anything that you put your mind to. You just have to believe it and be brave enough to say, okay, I might look crazy doing this at first, but I'm going to do it.
Right. Right. No, I love that quote, because I think sometimes we don't speak to that enough, because now when you start talking about bravery and a lot of the things that you just mentioned, you start tapping into self-worth, you start tapping into confidence, you start tapping into a lot of those things. And so when you're forced to face those things, you're kind of forced to kind of go inward, to kind of look at yourself, and to, if you're not willing to take the leap of faith, so to speak, and step out and do something that you really desired to do, because you're worried about all of those different things that you just gave as examples, all of the what someone is going to say, or how someone may receive or not receive, or what you know and what you don't know, who may be there to guide you and who may not be there to guide you. When you allow those things to keep you from accomplishing or stepping out to do the work to make your dreams a reality, you are now talking about, some internal things that you really kind of have to face, within yourself. And a lot of times I think we shrink and we get afraid to face it, because who wants to admit, oh no, I don't believe in myself, or I don't have confidence, or my self-worth isn't where it is. But actually, that's a wonderful place to be, to even just be able to acknowledge that and to discover that, because guess what? Now you can work on finding it. Now you can work on finding your confidence, your self-worth, your belief in yourself. It's not a bad thing to be in a place where you're challenged and believing in yourself. You just now need to begin to do the work to find out, okay, why don't I, and how can I? What's standing in my way? So I that's why that quote really stuck out to me, because it was like, when you talk about bravery, like, you think that that's not bravery. Like, you might think bravery is, something going out here and fighting in a war, something that's going to cost your life, or something in that regard, but just something that's related to. And so many of us have fears around the things that we really want to accomplish, our dreams. So many of us die. I know people who I've been knowing my whole life, and they've had desires and dreams, and they're aging, and they're not old enough to where you would think they're going to be no longer here soon, but that they are approaching the end of their life. And just slowly but steadily, and you're just like, oh wow, I know they always desire to do this, but because of fears, because of lack of self-worth, because of lack of confidence, I can see that they could possibly never accomplish that, and I think that's a tragedy,
Absolutely. I agree. And I think you actually bring up a good point too. One of the reasons, just going back to a question that you asked earlier about the book, one of the reasons why I put out the book is I lost my grandfather not too long ago. And he was one of the most crazy people, not crazy in a bad way, but he was just he was himself. Like, nobody was Tony the way Tony was Tony, right? And, he was, silly and goofy and funny, but like a man's man in a sense that he was very respectful of others and respectful of himself. And I think that was very inspirational to me. Like, everybody's gone through periods of their lives where, they've struggled with self-confidence, or they've struggled with just self-belief, myself included. But I think there were certain points in my life where I really said, this is my life. This is my, dash in the middle right now, right? This is the time that I've been blessed. And I'm a believer in God. So this is the time that I've been blessed to be put on this earth. And I really want to make an impact in other people's lives, and empower others, and celebrate others, and celebrate myself in the process, and not be afraid. And that's, that's a challenge every day. Like, I don't know very many people that go out here every single day and do every single thing that scares them. Like, and if you do, God bless, like, that's awesome. But I know, fear is something that you overcome over time, and as you grow to be more comfortable and confident with yourself. But I definitely don't want to, God willing, leave the earth without doing these things, what I'm saying? Without being an author, without being someone that's changed the lives of other people around me, without having that little boy or little girl, regardless of what age or race they're in, or even a peer of my own age, look at me and say, wow, like, I'm inspired by something that you did, and now I want to do my own thing. Like, I think the biggest piece of, like, flattery that I would feel is having a little boy or a little girl say, I love this book. Like I had a young little girl come to me and say, like, one of the characters, I love her hair, like it looks like mine.
Oh.
And that's so big for me. Like, for us as Black children, for us as minorities, to have a character that looks like us or reminds us of us, or like one of the characters has dreads, one of the characters has Afro puffs, one of the characters has like a part in his hair, and all of those things are intentional because I want kids to look at it, and even though they're animals, say like, wow, I see myself in this story, or like, this is inspirational to me, I can do this, I believe in myself. And like, those are the positive narratives that we need to be sending to our children and having within our households, and the conversations that we should be having over the dinner table. Like, all of those things are important. And whatever your family looks like, whatever your dynamic is, whatever your adult influence is, we need to have those conversations with our kids.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are just tuning in, I want you to know that I am speaking with Kiara McClendon. She is the author of a book, a children's book, Adventures of the Money Maven. It is a financial literacy book. And I am Rashida Anderson, your host here on Intellectual Chocolate. And I want you to subscribe to intellectualchocolate.com, where you will join our mailing list, and we will be able to stay in communication with you beyond just being here viewing this interview. Also, if you are in need of financial literacy, or if you want information about how to grow or start your business, I recommend that you go to the blackbusinessschool.com to sign up and see what the offerings are there. So again, I think that you have hit on so many good points. You know, you start talking about financial literacy, you start talking about the different things that plague the Black community, and then it can go in various different ways. You know, it's like we're talking about now having confidence and that sort of thing, because it all ties, in its own way. But before we go, and before we end the interview, I want you to tell us a little more about the book. I don't want you to give away too many secrets, but I know, like, on your website, you have some information. I believe the character name is Antoine. You call him Twan, right? Yes. So tell us a little more about that.
Sure. So some of our characters have very intentional names, right? So the character that you mentioned, his name is Antoine. His nickname is Twan, and his middle initial is T, and his last name is Dollars. So,
all right.
Say it all together, Twan T Dollars. So there are certain characters whose names are I guess you could say ethnic sounding, and I did that intentionally. I definitely wanted kids to say, okay, like, this sounds like it could be my friend, or, this person's name is kind of cool, and it has a money aspect to it. And Antoine's name is dope to me. It's cool to me. Like, his name is $20. Like, that's pretty cool. But I think with the other characters, same thing. Wanted their names and their birthdays to be very geared towards money and important dates in finance and financial literacy. Like, one of our characters' birthday is on tax day. Another character's birthday is on Madam C.J. Walker's birthday. So kind of having those conversations with the kids about who Madam C.J. Walker is, or what tax day actually is. Also, in terms of their backgrounds, all of the family structures are different. So the characters, like, one character has a father. They live with a single father. Their mother passed away, and that's not expressly written in the book, but if you read it a certain way, you can kind of tell that. Or characters being raised by grandparents, or one character has a veteran, a mother who's a veteran, and all of that was to celebrate the diversity that exists in America, that exists in our country, and that in a lot of ways we don't celebrate. The story is also set in a very interesting place, and that's one thing that I won't give away, because I want everybody to go pick up the book. But if you read where the story is set, as well as why it's set there, and some of the things that go along with that background information in the story, I think that you'll really see it as a celebration. One thing that I have not mentioned that I should have mentioned in the beginning is that the story is also written in English and Spanish throughout. So for those of you who want to teach your children Spanish, or for those Spanish-speaking individuals who want to just learn more about financial literacy, that book is also good for them and their children as well. We wanted it to be bilingual. Hopefully in the future we can get a few more languages that the story is written in, so that different cultures and different areas of the world can even take advantage of the book. But it's been a pleasure. I've loved writing the book. It allowed me to tap into this like little kid like influence that I don't get to tap into as much, and be creative and challenge myself. And it's my first book, so just that whole process of being a first time author, that was great. And I really want people to get the book, but more so to use the book as a tool for education, for access, for conversations, and hopefully we can just change the world. And that might sound like a tall order, but I think we can really do it.
Hey, one step at a time. I think that most things are possible. I completely agree. Just as you were talking, I said, you know what, I could really see this book. And I know that it ranges from 3 to 11, but if we can get this in a lot of preschools and a lot of kindergarten classes, a lot of pre-kindergarten classes, I think this would be great, because one thing that would benefit the Black community is being multilingual, bilingual, knowing different languages. So even if the Black community is purchasing it and it has multiple languages in it, that's great, because if alongside it we're reading it in English, we can also read it in Spanish, and we're giving our kids very early on that exposure to a different language. I know here in the U.S. we have a big Latino population, and so if we're talking about financial literacy, it puts us in a business as Black people to open up businesses, but be able to tailor to customers outside of our community. Or if there are people in the Black community who are Afro-Latino, but they primarily speak Spanish, it would be beneficial for us to know Spanish and for our children to know Spanish, because those are ways that we can now, do business with other communities. And the more languages I think that we know, the better.
Yes. One other thing that I just want to highlight is that the book comes with its own resources at the back. So say you're in a situation where you can't simulate a spending activity with the children that you influence, because say you're a teacher and you just don't have the tools to do that. You can use the tools in the back of the book to simulate that. Or let's say you're part of, a family that doesn't have a large excess of money where you can create that kind of simulation for your kids, or you can't give them an allowance or things like that. We wanted it to be used in a way that nobody could feel like the book couldn't be used in their circumstance.
Wow.
Regardless of what your socioeconomic background is, regardless of what your personal viewpoints are, we wanted the book to be for everyone. So absolutely.
That is great. Now, where can people, I know people who have been watching from beginning to end, want to know, where can they get a copy of this book?
Sure. So you can definitely get a copy of The Adventures of the Money Mavens, Money Talks, the first book, on Amazon.com, as well as BarnesandNoble.com. And there's also a website just for the brand as a whole, Money Mavens, Mavens crew.com. That's where you can get more information on the characters. You can contact me. I also have a couple social media pages for the brand as well. Instagram, Adventures of the Money Mavens, or The Money Mavens, as well as Facebook. If you type in The Adventures of the Money Mavens, all of our stuff will pop up. So you can get information or get the book from any of those resources.
Wow, that's great. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. It has been a pleasure just having this conversation with you and highlighting the importance of teaching financial literacy to our children.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. It was great to talk with you.
Cool. So if you would like to follow me on social media, you can follow me at Let's Talk About It with Rashida. You can find me there on Facebook as well as on Instagram. Again, I would invite you all to go ahead and subscribe to intellectualchocolate.com. Again, this is our media platform. We have the opportunity to bring conversations such as the one we just had to you, and not have to go through a lot of red tape, because this is our platform for our community, and we just want your support. We need your support in order for it to continue to thrive and to grow. That's what we ask of you, is for you to support. So go ahead and subscribe and get on our mailing list. And also, you know, this is the platform where we have intelligent conversations with brilliant Black minds. So if you or someone you know has something intelligent to say, we welcome you to go to the website and sign up to be a guest on the platform, and we would love to interview you. It's been great, and we hope that you all have a wonderful evening, and we are out.